Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics. On this show we'll be examining the post-Brexit political landscape and what it means for the parties in Kent and Medway. It has, by any measure, been a tumultuous period in politics. The vote to leave the EU led to convulsions across the political spectrum that many had not anticipated, least of all David Cameron, who was ushered out of Downing Street and replaced by Theresa May within days of the referendum. With me on the sofa to discuss the seemingly unending political merry-go-round are Chris Wells, the UKIP leader of Thanet Council. He's been at the centre of another row over the fate of Manston Airport this week, a subject we'll be talking about later on. We're also joined by Vince Maple, the leader of the Labour group on Medway Council. We've asked both of them to resist any altercations. Thanks to both of them for coming in. But first, Adam Devaney went to Canterbury to see if voters have been keeping up with all the frenzied twists and turns in the different political leadership races.
At the moment, British politics may be a bit baffling, so let me bring you up to date. After the EU referendum, David Cameron swiftly resigned as Prime Minister and Theresa May swiftly took over. Then Mr Corbyn triumphed in a bitter leadership contest over his opposition Owen Smith. And all seemed quiet on the UKIP front, with Diane James taking the reins. But after 18 days, Farage is back. For now. And now the Green Party leadership is shared between Caroline Lucas and Jonathan Bartley. So these are the characters in British politics. But does anybody know them? I went to Canterbury and Chatham to find out.
Obviously there's like the main parties like Labour, Tories, like that's portrayed a lot in the media, but the other ones you don't really hear about that often.
Yeah. I can understand how people are completely confused as to who's the new UKIP leader, for example, or who's the new Green leader.
I don't think we're given enough information when there's something happening in UKIP, for instance. You just see that bit, but you don't get now. Yeah. We have so and so in Liberal. We don't see that anywhere.
There's a lot going on, and you don't know what's happening in the country. Then how can you run your life?
See, to be honest, me with politics, I wouldn't be back on the politics. Like I don't even go down to vote, so it's just no real interest in it,
With Farage, I don't think people know who he is or what he stands for. People in this country want a statesman as a leader.
So Vince Maple, Jeremy Corbyn's got back the job he had in the first place, and he's been saying that he's relaxed about immigration numbers, will oppose grammar schools. That's not the kind of message which is going to prove popular with voters in Kent, is it?
Well, I think, as we've seen through that package there, there's a lot of work that needs to be done across Kent to get some basic messages across about who's running our party. So I think that's a job for all of us. I think certainly we saw an interesting week at Labour Party conference. I was really pleased, actually. We've seen that building of unity. One of the things I said before party conference started is we need to see that party of unity.
I've heard of it. You talk about unity all the time, though. I mean, it takes more than just unity to be successful as a party, doesn't it?
I absolutely agree. You can't just go out to your electorate and say we're a united party, therefore vote for us. That won't work. But actually, if you're not a united party, people are definitely not going to vote for you. And we saw that in some of the by-elections over the summer, frankly. Some of our results, which were disappointing. We had a mixed bag of results across that.
I think we can take a look at the by-election results in Kent since the election, which may prove interesting in viewing. So what is it specifically as a priority that you think Labour now needs to do? Is it set out very detailed policies or just strike the right mood music?
Well, I think we're on that journey. To use that terrible cliche, we're on that journey. So we've got to start with trying to rebuild trust. Part of the reason we didn't win last May wasn't because we didn't have fantastic parliamentary candidates across the country. It's because we weren't trusted on the economy. We've seen that. So we've got to try and rebuild that trust. And that's about saying we need an economy fit for the 21st century, jobs which are relevant, the green economy which is growing. We need those jobs to be coming here. And that would be a challenge in itself. I think the vote on the June the 23rd probably makes that more of a challenge. But that doesn't mean to say that the Labour Party won't be ready to stand up and fight for that coming to our shores.
Now, we know Jeremy Corbyn doesn't like personality politics. Is he really the right sort of person to lead the party and form a government? Can you imagine him being a Prime Minister?
I absolutely can. And I said that last week in Liverpool. I said he's got my support. If Owen had won, he would have had my support. I believe in loyalty. That's something that's really important to me as an individual. Look, we've got 500,000 members. We're now the biggest political party in Europe. Those 500,000 members...
That's different to supporters though, isn't it? Members is very different to supporters.
Well, that's true, but we've now got 500,000 people, a people's army, as somebody once used, to actually go out there, and a real army to go and have those conversations. We can only get that message out there if we've got the foot soldiers, and that's going to be a challenge. Jeremy Corbyn has thrown down the challenge at conference to say people can't just be keyboard warriors. They've got to be out there doing both the digital and the doorstep.
Chris Wells, I mean, from UKIP's perspective, perhaps originally you were taking support from the Conservatives, but there's been a lot of talk about how you're moving your tanks onto Labour's lawns. Is that happening in Kent?
Well, my tank's been on Labour's lawn for a long time. I mean, I'm the leader of a district council because I took the Labour Party down from 26 to 5 seats in Thanet. And, I was asked on another show recently, well, what will we do differently? Well, the answer is very little, because what we are able to present, what we're able to exploit is the absolute disjoint between Labour and much of its traditional working class support. They don't feel that the people who are leading the Labour Party and whose ideas are influencing the Labour Party actually appeal to those on the doorsteps who've been their traditional supporters, and they are happy to see people like us come along and reflect their views.
What are Labour supporters saying when they join you? Are they saying it's about immigration, or is it about the economy, or is it a wide range of different issues?
They're saying in no uncertain terms that actually they're ready to support anybody who doesn't appear to be sitting in some sort of ideological fantasy world where the sort of arguments been going on around momentum are dominating the scene. And that's what makes me rather sad about this week, because in a sense we've had a slight taste of the same sort of thing.
Momentum. A good thing for Labour or a bad thing for Labour?
Look, I don't care if you're a Momentum member, a Progress member, a Consensus member, or any other faction. I want you to be a Labour Party member, and I want Labour Party members to be getting out there. It is a challenge. Chris is right to say that we have, as a party, lost votes to UKIP. It would be naive to say otherwise, and Thanet is the clearest example
so
of that.
How do you get them back?
Well,
because they're obviously not listening to you.
And that's, as I say, that is a journey. It's about both having a credible opposition, both nationally and locally, and the policies that follow that. Now, some of Jeremy Corbyn's kind of heartfelt policies are incredibly popular. Across the county, we have hundreds of thousands of commuters. If we can deliver a publicly owned railway system which is delivering for the people of Kent and Medway, that's got to be a vote winner. And that's something I support.
Nationalise the railways, is that a UKIP position, Chris Wells?
I think I'd be slightly more pragmatic. If any of us can deliver any sort of owned railway that's delivering for commuters, I think we would be happy. True. And I think the problem is not so much about who owns it, it's how it's operated, whether or not it has the capacity and the timing and the reasonable price that people need to actually get to and from where they need to be.
But when you're having Dutch and German state-owned railways in the UK, which is what we've got currently, that's a flawed system. I would want to see, that investment coming back into the railways, and
Vince, let's be fair. That the system wasn't exactly perfect before it became privatised and owned before, and I mean I think that's one of the problems we have in terms of ideology in politics in Britain, is that actually we get sort of worried about who owns what rather than what it actually does.
Well, our journey is running a little bit over time, so we're going to move on now to examine how UKIP is faring in Kent. It's not been what you'd call the best of weeks for UKIP. It started with the shock news that its new leader, Diane James, had decided she didn't want the job after all. It ended with an alleged bout of altercation between its MEPs in Strasbourg. And we learned that Thanet Council was to abandon its efforts to reopen the former Manson Airport. So is the party on the brink of unravelling in 2016? Let's go back to 2014, when Mark Reckless, the MP for Rochester and Strood, put UKIP firmly in the headlines after defecting from the Conservative Party to rerun his seat in UKIP colours. Fast forward to May 2015, when the party's leader, Nigel Farage, failed to win an acrimonious battle to become MP for Thanet South. But even though Kent turned blue, with Tory MPs elected in every seat, UKIP was second place in 9 of the 17 constituencies in the county. Farage resigned almost immediately, but then just as quickly came back at the request of his party. Skip ahead to June 2016 and the party's biggest challenge, the referendum on the UK's membership in the EU. We all know how the vote turned out, and a couple of days after the referendum, Mr Farage resigned from the leadership again. but it was not to last for long. Just 18 days into her new role as leader of UKIP, Diane James decided she didn't want the job after all and put Mr Farage back in the spotlight, albeit as an interim leader. So what is the future for UKIP in Kent? We spoke to politics professor Richard Whitman for his insight.
Well, I think what they've got to do is to migrate themselves to a party that looks as if it's got something to say on the kind of issues that normally matter to people in a general election, which is economic well-being, but also tapping into allied concerns to that, such as healthcare and so on. And those things are being stirred up with a sort of immigration control type agenda. So I think what they probably have to do is have a hedging strategy. Be the sort of the police for Brexit, if you like, which is to make sure the government doesn't do a Brexit that looks as if it's not delivering on the desire to leave, but also at the same time offer a prospectus that suggests that they're not a one-trick pony.
Chris, we'll come to wider matters about UKIP in a minute, but first I've got to ask you about this report on Manston Airport, which has created a great deal of controversy. You got elected in 2015, or UKIP did, largely on the strength of your commitment to reopen Manston Airport. Now you're effectively walking away from it. Would you like to apologise to all those people who voted for UKIP in the belief that they would get their airport back?
No, I'll happily correct you on your assertion and assumption there. Well, we got elected because there was a catastrophic, toxic and dysfunctional Labour administration before us who actually pretty much wrecked everything they touched. And the fact that Manston Airport was a highly emotional issue in part of that, yes, I do acknowledge. But the election pledge was actually to do something within 7 days to move the CPO forward. We did that. We had an extraordinary meeting on the night we actually took office to actually reopen the CPO possibilities.
Voters have misunderstood your message then? You didn't spell it out clearly enough?
Well, no, I think it was spelled out very clearly. It's just what it's been spun to be since. The issue now is very simple and straightforward. We are facing, as are many local authorities, with presenting a local plan that has to run to 2031. When I arrived last year, it should have started in 2011. So we're already 5-6 years late with actually putting it in place. We have very little time to actually make that work. Local plans have to be evidence-based. In the previous local plan, Manston Airport was for aviation or airport use only. We had to try and produce a report that actually said that there was evidence that demonstrated we could hold that forward into the next local plan to 2031. The independent report that we commissioned has come back and said there is no evidence across the marketplace that we can maintain that position. If we were to go to the local planning inspectorate with that position, it would be thrown back at us, and as we are so late, there's a risk the government would take over where our housing went rather than anything else, and that's something I think no responsible politician could actually put their counsel
Well,
into.
you summarised your position very clearly there. Let's move on to the wider issue of UKIP in Kent. After the Brexit vote, I don't want to be too blunt, but what's the point of UKIP?
Oh, however many times I've been asked that question since the June the 23rd is quite remarkable. And it's asked usually by media commentators or political opponents or even one of the endless list of worthy academics that appear in front of books to make themselves sound learned. And, the truth is, we have not yet even begun the process of Brexit. I think that many of the voters who voted for Brexit during the course of the referendum campaign don't wholeheartedly or thoroughly trust the way the Conservatives may deliver it. So for at least 2 years, there's a very clear role for somebody who might be considered to be pure on this subject to make sure that they are actually doing what needs to be done. And I noticed very interestingly, the Conservatives already are trying very hard to sort of park their tanks on our lawn, to use a famous phrase. Grammar schools are suddenly in the row again. Brexit means Brexit is a sort of learned phrase that gets trotted out, and now we find the main Brexit dates are neatly slotted in before next elections, one before the county election, one before the next general election, and you just begin to wonder how serious they are about what they're doing. There's a very clear role for the next couple of years, and from that point onwards, there's an even clearer role to develop a vision of what Britain outside the European Union might actually look like.
Yes, well, I'm sure Vince has got something to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there you go. That was Chris, and he had some views. And let me just give you some response to some of those views. Firstly, when it comes to the issue of Brexit, I'm really pleased. One of the things Jeremy Corbyn's done this week is made Sir Keir Starmer our shadow Secretary of State for leaving the European Union, and he will do a tremendous job of holding David Davis, Theresa May and others to account. The people of Thanet ultimately will decide whether they were conned or not by the election pledges of Chris and his team, they will take a view on that. I know it's an emotive subject. There's people here in Medway who feel passionately about Manston, and they will feel potentially very let down by what's happened there. I think finally on this, look, UKIP across the board, whether it's nationally or internationally with what's happened over the last 7 days, they seem to be a party in disarray. And I think
that is a fair point, isn't it, Chris? That you don't appear as a party to be terribly united. The only time, the party seems to have a grip on things is when Nigel Farage is there and leading the party.
I think that it's pretty clear cut, isn't it? I mean, anybody who was going to have to follow Nigel Farage in terms of being leader of UKIP was always going to have a pretty tough job.
Do you fancy a tilt at the job yourself, Chris?
Well, when it first came up, I suggested doing so. And of course, now it's rerun. I'll have my 2-year membership and qualified this month. So watch this space. You never know.
He hasn't. Chris Wells hasn't denied that, Paul. I know he hasn't denied that.
But seriously, events this week have been interpreted as UKIP being a party which is unravelling.
Seriously, it's an embarrassing week in that context. It certainly is. We had behaviour in the European Parliament that I think even Nigel Farage described as being like what you might see in a third world parliament struggling or whatever. And prior to that, we have the embarrassment of a leader stepping down after 18 days, having not even formalised their position. Those things are embarrassing. But I think part of that, you'd have to say, is that much of UKIP is still in the position where it is sort of anti-establishment. And it's only actually in Senate, I think, we're really running anything. And that's when people start to learn something about the compromises you have to make when you're in charge. And I think there's still an awful lot of people within UKIP who are pretty much anti-establishment, anti the political establishment, and actually can't adapt sometimes when you get to a position near power.
How's your pledge to be the most boring council in the UK going then?
I am still the most boring council in the UK, but you guys just seem to like it.
Vince?
Well, look, I think here in Medway we've got the situation where we've got a by-election coming up on the 20th.
Which, if you lose, is going to open up lots of questions.
We've got a brilliant candidate in Isaac Igwe. Other candidates are available, of course. But that's been caused by the UKIP councillor resigning at her post less than 18 months in. She could have taken the decision to not stand. I understand why Mrs. Reckless has chosen to move to be with Mark. I understand that, but actually you could have taken a choice last year to not stand if quite clearly he expected to stand for the Welsh Assembly. So even there, that's costing taxpayers of Medway over £10,000.
Well, there's always a price for democracy.
Does Vince really want to debate who costs taxpayers anywhere or whatever? We've got.
I've
had to pay £5.1 million worth of compensation bills because of the adequacy of your colleagues in finance ability to take sensible decisions about live animal exports. A by-election is a by-election. It costs a bit of money, but it doesn't cost anything like that sort of amount, which was an utterly stupid decision against all legal advice taken by people whom you claim to support.
Now, Chris, UKIP has always said that it's a party which is unlike other parties. It does things differently.
Well, that's certainly seems to be true.
That is true. But you're sharing some similarities with Labour in appearing disunited, infighting, factions within the party wanting some things done and others not wanting some things done. You're just like the other parties in that sense now.
Well, I suspect maybe Vince, like myself, is probably taking the view at times over the last few months, as I am right now, which is that actually let the national people get on with it, let the factions sort themselves out, and we'll get on with actually serving the people in the areas in which we've elected to serve. And that's certainly been my focus over the last few weeks, and I was hoping that was coming to an end, but I might have to put the tin hat on and duck down again and just keep working.
Now, you're both leaders in different ways. What thing have you learned as a result of being a leader which you might want to pass on to your colleagues higher up the food chain?
I would definitely say listen. Listening is key. Not thinking I don't have all the answers, and I know that, and I know my colleagues know that as well. Definitely.
Chris?
I don't think I would disagree with that, but I think the problem is that when you get to a national level very often, and I think we've seen this with prime ministers over a number of different periods now, is that actually the number of people they actually see or hear to listen to is shrunk, and what you end up with is a very small number of people who pretty much tell you what you want to hear rather than what's actually being said further out. And it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy when people have been in that top job for a while. They only get to be told what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And maybe it's a different sort of listening we need to talk about.
Well, we're always listening, but unfortunately the clock is against us. So that's all from us here at Paul on Politics. Thanks to our guests for coming into the studio. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can catch up on all the latest political news by logging on to kentonline.co.uk or listening to KMFM. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.